Okay, let's start here. Increased heart rate, water retention, digestion completely shuts off. That means the process of your body taking the food you ate, breaking it down and utilizing it for energy, shut down, done. Forget about it. Oh, and think about it. If your body's not breaking down that food and utilizing it for energy, chances are it's going to store it as fat, and cognitive function decreases. Now I want you to ask yourself, is stress really worth it?
Yo, what up? This is Jyima Ofori-Atta, certified personal trainer and holistic health coach. Welcome to the Gym Life Energy Series.
We have the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is responsible for fight or flight, stress, which is important for survival, but it shuts off digestion. And we tap into that way too much. It's a lot. I need you to take a second, soak it in, because a lot of times we hear about stress, but then we think that stress is not really having such an immediate impact on us. I have a story. Let me pause for a second. So I grew up with a West African Ghanaian father. So that means I had a bunch of uncles from Ghana as well. And anytime they wanted to make a point, they would digress into these stories. I used to get so pissed off, and now here I am as I get older, and I got to go into my stories. But this story is true. Sometimes I used to wonder if their stories were true. This one is very true. My very, very, very good friend from college, we've been friends for over 24 years. When we were in college, he was diagnosed with a medical condition where the doctors were unsure of how well he would do as far as moving forward, whether his quality of life would be insanely compromised or he may not even make it. And it's crazy because 20 years later, we had the conversation and I almost forgot because we always laughing and joking and having a good time. And I'm like, bro, like, you still dealing with that? And he was like, yeah, I am still dealing with it. He says, and I said, what do you think? He said, all the doctors were confused. And to this day, they're still confused. He says, but what I determined a long time ago is that I can't control what happens to me, but I can determine how I react to it. And he says, if I pass, it will not be because of stress. He said he read stories of people who had cancer, who lived for years, and the moment they found out they had cancer, by the way, he didn't have cancer. Don't try to figure out the story. Just get the point of the story, okay? So he said the moment they found out they had cancer, it wasn't too long before they passed away. And he said he questioned, was it the cancer that killed him or the stress of finding out they had cancer? We don't know all of the ramifications that stress imposes on us, but we do know some of them. And going back to what I said earlier, you have the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for fight or flight and getting your body ready for activity. It has a set of physiological responses that are necessary in order to keep you alive, but it's not meant to be tapped into all the time. Like that adrenaline rush that we get, it's not meant to be tapped into all the time. Then conversely, when we're talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for relaxation and digestion, when that's turned on, we're at our best. We're at our best. We can't undervalue the process of absorbing the nutrients out of food. We can't undervalue how important that is. When we eat, that's for fuel to give us energy and to move forward. And then it's all cyclical because then that maximizes our workouts as well. Sometimes, I look back, I've been training for over 10 years now, and I have to say there's two commonalities that I've seen for my clients who have gotten results versus my clients who haven't gotten results. Even for my clients who are going up and down. Let's take that. Let's forget about the ones who had results versus the ones who didn't have results. We'll get into that later. Let's talk about a few clients that have been with me for 7-8 years and they've gone through spaces where they're extremely efficient, they're doing well, they're getting the results they want, body fat is down, their energy is through the roof, they're feeling good. The commonalities that I'm not even sure they're aware of is one, they've tapped into their why. That's their intrinsic motivation. That's that thing that allows them to feel comfortable in going to the gym and eating the foods that are most conducive to them. So one, they find their why that keeps them consistent. And two, their stress level is managed. Like those are the two things. When those things, now let's not get it confused. There are other factors that get people to get results. But when I find those two in alignment, that big motivating factor, and two, that their stress level is in check, oh, they're running through the roof. They're running through the roof. I remember a particular client that I had, we sat down, she was going through a stressful situation. I said, okay, we're gonna sit down, we're gonna go. And what it was when you're working with somebody for a long time, you start to learn the fluctuations in their weight and body fat. So we got to a point where we saw she was stuck at about 4 pounds over her weight where she felt her best. In addition to that, her body fat was a little bit higher than usual. And we were doing everything. I'm talking about, and when I mean everything, it's one of those clients that lock in. You're like, yo, I need you to do this. She's on it, like complete beast, right? And we were doing everything. We're on point. We're moving. Food is where it needs to be. Exercise is where it needs to be. And I said, this is what I need you to do for me. For the next 3 weeks, just pay attention to how you respond to things. Try to stay in a relaxed, chill space. And after those 3 weeks, keeping everything the same, we broke right through that plateau. It is the most important thing that we have to understand, because there are a set of physiological responses that happen with stress. And now it kind of gets into the center of everything I do. I have certain clients, not even certain, all my clients, they bust their ass. Like they work hard. They work hard. I'm talking about physicians, attorneys, people who head their organizations in marketing. Like they go hard. One thing I do not play with is that when they come here, you're not going to carry that in here. And when I mean, I'm not demanding it. What I'm saying is, if you show up 10 minutes late because you're at work, or you have to handle some things for your family, or you got kids, whatever it is, cool. I'll adjust the workout. It's fine. It's not a big deal. Reason being, because I know that if I add on to the stress this person has throughout the day, no matter what we do in that workout, they're not going to reap the benefits. That's how you have to look at everything. I keep that to my core and I hold it dearly, that nobody is going to send me to that set of physiological responses. That's the way I frame it in my mind, right? And it's not to say that you're not going to be met with these moments, right? So let's think about going back to the sympathetic nervous system. So what happens if you start to break it down into a day-to-day basis, that person or that friend or that coworker that increases your heart rate. Okay, let's get back to it. Increases your heart rate. Also has you storing water. Also stops your digestion and decreases your cognitive function. You start with all these things that are happening because of that coworker, that friend, that acquaintance. These are things that are happening that you have to start to establish some level of control over, right? And I always talk about balance and balancing emotions and not bottling up. One of my favorite fighters, and when I say favorite fighters, John Jones. Not so much outside of the cage, but inside the cage. Outside of the cage, he's been working on himself, so I like that. Huge fan. But he said something that it's always resonated with me, was that it's not about bottling up the butterflies. And I took that as the emotions, right? The anger, the angst, the anxiety, all those emotions that start to happen when you start to feel stressed out. It's not about bottling them up. It's about getting them to fly in formation, because you don't want to go to either extreme. If you let those butterflies fly everywhere, that's when you get the high stress levels, right? That's when this dude next to you is like, hey, did you finish that report? Knowing he gave it to you late. And now is expecting you to finish it. And all those things happen. Those butterflies want to fly everywhere. It's not about letting them fly everywhere, and it's not about bottling them up either. It's about acknowledging that they're there, allowing them to pass, okay, letting them fly in formation, and then knowing that it will subside, it'll go away. But if we try to control that in either way, that's when the stress almost increases. So with with managing these responses or managing how we react to them, it's not about stopping it either. It's about stepping away from it and observing yourself. Stepping away from these interactions and observing yourself. I have a saying that I tell friends as much and as often as I can, is that if I'm cooking a meal, and here I go. This is it. If I'm cooking a meal, you understand I have a meal here, and I bring it to you, right? So if I bring that meal to you and there's too much seasoning on it, there's too much salt, there's too much pepper, and I give you that meal, I can't take that seasoning off. It's already there. But if I give you that meal and I didn't put enough seasoning on it, I can always go back and add some later. Oh, it needs a little more salt? Okay, cool. It needs a little more pepper? Okay, cool. So if you take that and translate that into life and occurrences, is when something happens, just almost choose to rather underreact than overreact. I would rather underreact than overreact. That's how I respond to everything. Meaning, like, if somebody says something that I find offensive, somebody says something that upsets me or triggers me, all I say to myself is sit with it, don't respond, don't allow all those responses to happen physiologically. We already know what they are. Don't allow those to happen. Sit with it, and if you really feel like saying something, wait till later and say it when you're in a much more calm and articulate space. Because when it becomes reactive, that's when you kind of feed onto that. And we always have to remember that goes back into everything. There's scenarios and stories where people are eating the right foods, doing the right exercises, but they're not seeing results. That's because the stress levels are not in check. It's the most important thing that I can emphasize, right? Now, if I take that to my personal life and even this time with myself, my stress levels tend to occur a little bit differently, in the sense where I want to do everything, like everything. So now let's say I have a client that wants to train at 5 a.m., another one wants to train at 6 a.m., and then I want to finish working on this app, or I want to finish working on this podcast and the editing and all those things. And then I realize in the moment, oh shit, I overbooked myself. Like, dang, I did way too much. Now I have somebody coming in and I have all these things happening, and I want to get them all done and get them all done effectively and efficiently. That's when my stress would start to kick in. Like, I'm gonna get this done. I'm gonna get this done. At that moment, I tell myself, you know what? If it spills, it spills. If it messes up, it messes up. Just try to get it done. So now I didn't go to the extreme of letting everything break down because I'm still trying to get it done, but I didn't go to the extreme of feeling like I had to get it done either. It's insane how many times I've thought that me dropping the ball or messing up meant the end of the world, and then the next day it was fine. That's also because I set this high bar, right? I remember years ago I was dealing with something where it was, as we start to get to know each other, I'll get into these stories a little more deeply. But it was a situation where I had a bunch of different friends calling me. Like, yo, you all right, Jyim? Jyim, you good? Jyim, you good? I mean, I'm be all right. And one of my friends particularly called me and loved this dude to death because he's one of those people that, as far as decision-making in some street events, some people would say he made bad decisions. But in addition to that, he was insanely brilliant in school. So to me, when you have that balance of like just really educated, really intelligent, also street smart, you have this insight on life where it's like almost like you may be 30 years old, but your mind is like 60, right? So he calls me and he's like, yo, Jyim, you all right? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I'm all right. He could hear it in my voice. I wasn't, though, because what I was dealing with is like life altering. And I didn't know which way it would go. And he says, I want you to remember one thing. He says, life has its ups and downs. Never get too high. Never get too low. Always try to stay centered. And in the end, it will all make sense. Now, later on, he told me he stole it from some Google thing, whatever. It don't matter where he got it. It don't matter where he got it. At that moment, it was very deep to me because it was coming from my dear friend. You see what I'm saying? And when he told me that, instantly, and every time you hear words, it hits you in different ways. Instantly, what connected with me was, in the end, it will all make sense. And I immediately thought about all the times something seemed so big in the moment, but then later when I look back, it wasn't as big. Like so many times in that moment, we get that phone call, we have that situation, we have that, whatever it is, that conflict. In that moment, it seems like the most important thing in the world. As time passes, we're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. If we're able to take that knowledge or that information and apply it to situations as they happen and say, just wait. Just wait. It's cool. It's cool. Okay. This happened. It triggered me. Okay, cool. I'll wait. If I need to add seasoning to that later, I will. So it's not saying it's not saying to roll over either. Like, we're not here to roll over for life and not do anything. It's to say, okay, if something requires my immediate response, okay, I don't have a choice. But anytime I do have a choice, I'm going to exercise being patient, waiting, because I don't want that set of physiological responses. I'm going to say them again and drill them into you. I don't want increased heart rate, water retention, my digestion to completely shut down and have me start storing fat, and my cognitive function to decrease. Like, I don't want these things. And trust me, there's other things that I'm leaving off that list too. I just wanted certain ones for you guys to be able to remember. Okay? So now, when he told me that, it really resonated with me in terms of like, okay, and I took a step back and I breathed and I said, you know what? Like, whatever happens, eventually it'll pass. Like, eventually. And what I need to do now is step back and just observe it. Step back, look at yourself in this situation, and then kind of see how you're responding to it. Because it's one thing to be angry versus just having anger. Okay? And I want to try to explain that a little better. It's one thing to have something trigger you. Now you're in this space of just being angry. Like, I'm angry, I am anger, whatever it is. Versus stepping back and looking at that emotion that you're having. Okay, oh wow, it's so interesting that I'm angry right now. What is it about that? While you're analyzing and being curious about your emotions that pass you, they start to subside a little bit. Taking that step back and watching yourself, and I can't emphasize that enough, taking that step back and watching your emotions as they happen will allow them to subside a lot quicker. Trust me, it will allow those emotions to subside a lot quicker. So nobody's expecting you to go out and be a Buddhist monk tomorrow. And I'm going to go to one more story. This is just the way I talk. I remember my daughter, she was having a conversation and she learned about boundaries. And she was super excited. She was like, yo, I just learned about boundaries, Dad, and bang, dang, and I'm about to go. And it's almost like she had a new toy called boundaries, and she's about to use boundaries here. I said, whoa, hey, let's slow down, okay? I get it. Boundaries are very important, and you need to exercise them. But you have to remember that the first time you go to place boundaries on someone, it is going to be sloppy. It's going to be uncomfortable. The person may not understand. It may almost cause you to now be in a space of discomfort and angst and anxiety. And then you start to think, well, why am I doing boundaries when I'm in more discomfort than I was before? It's because it's going to take time. I said, at that moment, babe, you don't stop. You're going to try to set boundaries again and set them again and set them again. And each time it's going to get a little bit easier. So as you're stepping out now and practicing stepping back and observing your emotions as they happen, being curious, as you're stepping back and being curious about your emotions. So, always remember why. So your digestion could be improved, your overall health, all these things that come with being in that calm and relaxed space, all those benefits. As you're practicing staying in that space of calmness and relaxation, and understanding there are gonna be times that you get into this stressed out space. All you're doing is just trying to improve. That means Monday you go out, you hit into that stress space, you're like, shit, I messed up Monday, I got stressed out, I should. No, it's okay. Next time I'll try again. Step back, observe myself. I want you to always make that the center of everything. Once that's in place, everything else becomes a lot easier because now your cognitive function is up. We out.